Hi, I'm Dan Miller, Historical Solutions LLC. Thanks for stopping by my latest video. Um, I'm broadcasting this to you, recording this for you, at one of my favorite places on the planet Earth. I'll tell you why I'm here toward the end, but I welcome you and hope you enjoy it here as much as I do. We've got an important topic today, and that is, what does September 11th, 2001 mean 10 years later? I want to help you kind of sort out what you think your thoughts are on that. 10 years past, what does it mean for us? I've got three things to share. I think you'll find them helpful as you go through your process of shaping, crystallizing, and all the rest of what you think the 10th anniversary of September 11th really means. Coming up, three tools and my favorite place on the planet, one of my favorite places on the planet Earth. All right, tool number one is something I've done, labor of love for you on this a couple of days ago. I went back to December 7th, 1951, 10 years after Pearl Harbor, the Japanese surprise attack on American forces that started the American entry into World War II. I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to look at what Americans did 10 years after that as they went about commemorating, or if they commemorated at all. And I wanted to share with you what I found because it's pretty interesting and I think a little bit surprising. Let me give you some of the flavors of what we were doing 10 years after Pearl Harbor on the 10th anniversary in 1951. Out in Helena, Montana, people were wearing white flowers on their shirts and on their dresses that day to show that they were thinking about the tragedy that had occurred at Pearl Harbor 10 years before. In a place called Santa Claus, Indiana, at a little amusement park called Santa Claus Land, they had a special Pearl Harbor commemoration event. And the park, which had been open for 5 years in 1951, the park had its biggest crowd ever. Over 10,000 people came to participate in the ceremony and the activities on the 10th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. In Washington, D.C. was a very unusual activity that day at the 10th anniversary. They had an air raid drill to, in a sense, commemorate the air raid attack that had occurred 10 years before. They had an air raid drill 10 years after. And across the United States, in small towns and cities alike, the American Legion had organized small graveside ceremonies for people who were the victims of those attacks at Pearl Harbor. I guess the official ceremony, if you will, in 1951 was at Pearl Harbor itself. The Vice President of the United States, Alben Barkley of Kentucky, and the Secretary of the Interior at the time, Oscar Chapman, they were kind of co-hosts or co-presiding officers over the official ceremony marking the 10th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. And it was simple too. They had 3 military chaplains stand up and give a prayer, one prayer per chaplain, 3 prayers, and then a small naval vessel chugged out into the harbor, stopped over the top of the wreckage of the USS Arizona, which is still there today, which was destroyed at Pearl Harbor on December 7th. And the boat erected a flagpole on top of the wrecked hulk from 10 years before. And they raised a flag. And that was the ceremony. Newspapers, where I got some of this information, by the way. I looked at about 35 or 40 newspapers from December 7th, 1951. And you'll be interested to know something else from this. There's some common themes from the newspapers. One is they recounted what happened down to the minute 10 years before. Second thing is they had a local tie-back of people from their particular town or city who had been at the attack or had family there or what have you. But the third thing that was in common is they kind of revealed a little bit about the public mood in 1951 as people reflected back 10 years before. A lot of nervousness, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of gloom, to be perfectly honest, because everybody knew in 1951 that the world had changed 10 years ago. But what they didn't know was what had happened 10 years since, and that's what unnerved people. They had gone through a horrific world war with tens of millions of people killed, including some of their own. They had also, after that war, had gone through and started an unusual war that nobody had ever gone through before, which we now call the Cold War, that standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union, each with their bombs, each with the ability to push buttons and destroy large chunks of the population of the opposing side. They certainly didn't expect that in the 10 years that the Soviet Union would be bent upon the destruction of the Western way of life, and that was what was at stake with the Cold War. And they didn't expect that in 1951 they'd be a year and a half into the first bloody conflict of the Cold War, which was the war in Korea. And by the way, it was not going well at the time of the 10th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. So they were tense, they were gloomy, they were a tad bit in despair in 1951 as they celebrated, or not celebrated, but commemorated the 10th anniversary. Interesting to think about one of the things that they clung to, well, that's a bad choice of words, one of the things that they found confidence from was the fact that they were committed to it never happening again. Hence the air raid drill in Washington, D.C. We are prepared, this will never happen again. And that did give them some measure of promise and optimism amidst all of the despair that was clearly evident on the 10th anniversary of Pearl Harbor in December of 1951. So there's one of your tools right there, perhaps, as a suggestion from me, a prayer, something on your clothing to show that you're remembering, and maybe whether you can be there physically or just mentally, be mindful of graveside ceremonies of the people who have gone before in that horrible day 10 years ago. Tool number 2 coming up. Second thing I'd like to share with you on this, as you kind of help sort out some of your thoughts a little bit, is a marriage of math and history. Some numbers just mean more than others, don't they? Especially when you talk about anniversaries. The 10th means more than the 9th. The 25th means more than the 18th. The 100th means more than the 79th. And on and on. There are certain numbers in anniversaries in lapsed time. There are certain numbers that mean more than others. And we're at one now, 10. So I guess I'd like you to think about not only what were you doing that day. We'll all think about that. But also, what has it meant since then? What have we lost? What have we held on to in the memory since then? And perhaps what should we think about holding on to in the memory going forward? So I guess I'd put that in kind of 3 categories. What was lost, and maybe understandably so. What was gained, thankfully so. And what was lost but ought to be regained, urgently so. 3 ways to think about the marriage of math and history in this particular case, behind the importance of the 10th anniversary. Third and final tool next. I read an article the other day, Wall Street Journal, blew my mind. What things weren't around 10 years ago for September 11th and that horrible day? What things weren't around? There was no Facebook. There was no Twitter. There was no social media of really any kind. There was no phones or cameras built into recording devices built into your phone that you could hold by hand, shoot in real time, and send in real time. None of that existed. Think what would have happened if it did. How much would our memory of it, our experience of it, number 1, but our memory of it, number 2, would change if we had those images from 2001 using the technology of 2011. I'll tell you that you don't have to be a rocket scientist. God knows I'm not one. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out, my goodness, this would have changed in our minds drastically had we had those kinds of capabilities. The unanswered question in that is, for the next one, whatever it may be, for the next one, how will it change us when we can remember it in such a way? I'll sign off in just a minute. Well, I appreciate you taking time. This has been one of my favorite videos, and the reason I wanted to shoot this here is because, as I said before, it's one of my favorite places on the planet Earth. I'm at McCormick's Creek State Park in southern Indiana, and I'm at campsite, I think it's 174, and in a few weeks I'm going to be sitting right here again and stirring a pot of elk stew with one hand and sipping an adult beverage with the other, and they'll both taste great. So I wanted to spend this time on what I think is a very important conversation at a place that is very important to me. So thank you for watching, thank you for listening. Go to the website. I've got some leadership stuff about September 11th in our conversation today that I left off of the video. I put a link into the email that you're seeing this from. I put a link to that site so you can get there quickly. Take a look. I almost forgot. Please email me. Call me, 317-407-3687. Text me at that number. I don't care what you use. I'd love to have your thoughts. How should we remember September 11th, 10 years after? What should we remember? Think about the 3 tools that I just kind of laid out for you and how they might help you answer that question. I'd love to have your thoughts. I think I'll speak the unspoken assumption, which is it needs to be remembered. But what's it look like from your standpoint? How should it be done? I'm Dan Miller. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. You can bank on the fact that I wish you all the best.